I stood in the driveway, watching the taillights disappear into the early morning fog. My father's vintage truck, the one he'd spent 15 years restoring by hand, rolled down the street with Lydia behind the wheel. One of her suitcases had fallen open in the doorway behind me, clothes spilling onto the porch like evidence of her hurry. My hand shook as I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app. The inheritance account showed zero. $47,000 gone. Transferred out at 3 this morning while I was still asleep. I refreshed the screen 3 times, hoping it was a mistake, knowing it wasn't. My legs gave out and I sank to the curb, the phone slipping from my fingers onto the wet pavement. The fog pressed around me, like it was trying to suffocate what was left of my life. I buried my father 2 days ago. I'd held it together through the funeral, through the condolences, through reading his last letter to me. And now this. The woman I'd loved for 6 years had waited until I was at my weakest, then taken everything and disappeared. My breath came in broken gasps. This couldn't be real. But the empty driveway and the zero balance told me otherwise. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. My name is Henry Calloway. I'm 39 years old, and until this morning, I thought I understood my life. I worked long shifts at the manufacturing plant, the same one my father had worked at for 30 years before his heart gave out. Lydia and I had been married for 6 years. We'd struggled financially, argued about money, gone through rough patches like any couple. But I believed we were building towards something together. 3 days ago, my father's lawyer called me into his office for the reading of the will. I'd expected nothing. Dad lived simply, saved carefully, but never talked about money. Then the lawyer told me about the inheritance. $47,000, carefully invested over decades. Enough to pay off our mortgage, start fresh, maybe finally take the vacation Lydia had been asking for. I'd driven home excited to tell her, imagining her face when she heard the news. She'd seemed distant when I explained everything, distracted. I'd blamed grief, assumed she was giving me space to process losing my father. Now I understood. She hadn't been distant. She'd been planning. Calculating, preparing to take everything the moment it landed in our account. I forced myself to stand up and walk back inside. The house felt different now, huh? I moved through rooms we'd shared for years, seeing them with new eyes. Every framed photo that included Lydia was gone. The wedding picture from our mantle. The vacation shots from our trip to the coast. Even the casual snapshots stuck to the refrigerator with magnets. She'd erased herself systematically, deliberately. In the garage, my father's old toolbox was missing. The one he'd promised would be mine someday, filled with tools he collected over a lifetime. She'd taken that too, probably to sell. I stood in the middle of our bedroom, looking at the empty half of the closet where her clothes had hung. The drawers on her side of the dresser gaped open, cleaned out completely. This wasn't an impulsive decision. This was planned, methodical, executed with precision. I sat on the edge of the bed and cried. Not dramatically, not loudly. Just quiet tears that I couldn't stop, my whole body shaking with the weight of betrayal. Then I saw it. A single envelope on the kitchen table, my name written across the front in Lydia's handwriting. I picked it up with trembling hands. The note inside was brief and cold. No explanation, no apology, just a handful of sentences that felt like they'd been written by a stranger. Henry, we want different things. I can't keep pretending this is enough. Don't call me. Don't try to find me. It's better this way. You'll move on. She'd signed her name at the bottom like she was closing a business transaction. No love, no personal touch. Just her signature, stark and final. Then a last line at the very bottom. You'll be fine. Those 3 words burned more than anything else. Like my pain was predictable, manageable, something she'd already factored into her calculations. Like the 6 years we'd spent together could be dismissed with casual reassurance. I read the note 5 times, trying to find something, anything, that resembled the woman I'd married. But there was nothing. Just cold words and colder calculation. My grief was shifting into something sharper now, something that felt like anger but burned colder. My phone rang, startling me. I looked at the screen. Marcus Wynn, my father's lawyer, my childhood best friend. I answered, my voice barely working. Marcus. Henry, he said gently. How are you holding up after the funeral? I couldn't answer. The silence stretched between us until finally, I told him everything. Marcus went quiet on the other end. I could hear him breathing, processing what I just told him. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. Henry, I suspected something wasn't right. What do you mean? I asked. When we were finalizing the estate paperwork, Lydia called my office 3 times asking about timelines. She wanted to know exactly when the funds would transfer. I thought she was just helping you manage things, but something felt off about the question she was asking. My stomach tightened. Why didn't you say something? Because I had no proof, just a feeling. And I didn't want to add to your stress right after losing your father. He paused. But Henry, she made a mistake. A big one. I sat up straighter. What kind of mistake? Marcus's tone shifted from sympathetic friend to professional lawyer. The inheritance was separate property, not marital assets. She had no legal right to transfer those funds without your explicit authorization. And if she added herself to that account without your knowledge, that's another problem entirely. Hope flickered in my chest for the first time since watching those taillights disappear. Can we get it back? We can try, Marcus said. But I need to ask you something first. Do you want justice, or do you want peace? I thought about my father's truck disappearing into the fog, about the empty photo frames, about 6 years of my life built on what I now understood was a foundation of lies. Both, I said firmly. I want both. The next morning, Marcus explained the legal process. We sat in his office, him behind a desk covered in organized files, me in a chair across from him still feeling numb. The inheritance was transferred to you as sole beneficiary, Marcus said, pointing to the documents. It was never community property. When Lydia moved it out of the account, she committed conversion of separate property. That's a civil matter, but it's clear-cut. What do we need to do? I asked. First, we document everything. Bank statements, transfer records, dates, times. We build a paper trail that shows exactly what she did and when. Then we file a civil claim to recover the funds. He looked at me carefully. This won't be quick, Henry. And it won't be easy. But if you're committed to seeing it through, we have a strong case. I nodded. I'm committed. Good, Marcus said. Then let's get started. He handed me a list of documents to gather, accounts to access, records to compile. As I looked at the list, something shifted inside me. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was taking action. I was fighting back, not with rage or revenge, but with the law, with truth, with a patient, methodical pursuit of what was rightfully mine. That afternoon, I went to the bank. The bank manager recognized me. I've been coming here for years, depositing paychecks, managing our modest savings. Now I sat across from her requesting complete transaction histories for the past 6 months. My hands trembled as the printer started spitting out pages. Each sheet was another piece of evidence, another step toward getting my life back. But it hurt to watch. Every transaction told a story I hadn't known was happening. Lydia had been slowly moving money into a separate account for 3 months. Small amounts at first, $50 here, $100 there. Amounts I wouldn't notice. Then larger transfers as the inheritance date approached. She'd been preparing for this, building her escape fund while I worked overtime to make rent. One withdrawal location jumped out at me. Harper Ridge Apartments, across town. $1,500, dated the same day as my father's funeral. She'd rented a new place while I was burying my dad. I sat in the bank lobby afterward, holding the stack of statements, feeling sick. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't a mistake. This was calculated betrayal executed with precision and planning. Marcus had told me to document everything. So I went home and created a folder. Organized the statements by date. Highlighted every relevant transaction. Took photos of the empty house, the missing belongings, the notes she'd left. This was how you built a case. Slowly, carefully, methodically. I couldn't help myself. That evening, I drove to Harper Ridge Apartments. I didn't know what I was looking for or what I'd do if I found her. I just needed to see. The complex was nice, newer construction with balconies and a pool. More expensive than anywhere we'd lived together. I parked across the street in my old sedan and waited. 20 minutes later, I saw her. Lydia walked out of the building, wearing clothes I'd never seen before. Designer jeans, an expensive-looking jacket. Her hair was different, styled in a way that probably cost more than I made in a day. She was laughing with a woman I didn't recognize, both of them carrying shopping bags. She looked happy, relaxed, like she didn't have a care in the world. Like she hadn't just destroyed someone who'd loved her for 6 years. My chest tightened with a pain that felt physical. This was the woman I'd married. The woman I'd worked double shifts for. The woman I'd comforted during her own family struggles, supported through job losses, stood beside through everything. And now she was spending my father's money on clothes and fancy apartments while I sat in a car trying not to fall apart completely. Then I saw him. A man came up behind her, wrapped his arm around her waist, kissed her on the cheek. She leaned into him naturally, comfortably, like they'd been together for a while. My hand was on the door handle before I realized what I was doing. I was about to get out, to confront her, to demand answers. But something stopped me. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the realization that confronting her like this wouldn't give me what I needed. It would just give her the satisfaction of seeing me broken. I sat back in my seat, watching them walk to a car. A nice car, much nicer than the truck she'd stolen from me. The man opened her door. She smiled at him. They drove away together. I whispered to myself in the empty car, not like this. Not with anger and accusations in a parking lot. Not with her looking at me like I was pathetic for caring. Not giving her the chance to twist this into something it wasn't. My phone rang. Marcus. Henry, we're ready to file the initial motions. I need you to come in tomorrow to sign some documents. I'll be there, I said, still watching the empty parking space where her boyfriend's car had been. As I drove home, something had changed. The heartbreak was still there, sharp and constant. But underneath it was something else now. Clarity. Purpose. The understanding that I was going to get through this, not by exploding or begging, but by letting the truth and the law do their work. Word spread at the plant faster than I expected. I'd taken 3 days off for the funeral, and when I came back, people knew. Small towns were like that. News traveled through families, through friends of friends, through the invisible network of gossip that connected everyone. Some coworkers offered condolences about my father. Others gave me looks I couldn't quite read. I heard whispers in the break room, conversations that stopped when I walked by. One afternoon, a guy named Phil from the maintenance crew cornered me by the time clock. "Hey man, I heard about you and Lydia." Rough situation. I nodded, not wanting to get into it. "She must have had her reasons," he continued. "I mean, people don't just leave unless something's wrong, you know?" The implication was clear. He assumed I'd done something. That this was somehow my fault. That Lydia's leaving was justified by sins I must have committed. I wanted to defend myself, to explain what she'd actually done. But I just clocked in and walked away. Later, I found a cup of coffee on my workstation. Still hot, black like I preferred it. Toby, one of the quiet guys from the assembly line, caught my eye and nodded. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. That simple gesture, that silent support, meant more than any words could have. Lydia's social media told a different story than the truth. She started posting photos of her new life. Brunch at expensive restaurants. Sunset views from her balcony. Quotes about self-care and finding yourself. Comments flooded in from people who didn't know the full story. "You deserve this. So happy you're finally living for yourself. Proud of you for making hard choices." She never mentioned me directly. But the narrative was clear. She was the brave woman who'd left an unfulfilling relationship. She was the hero of her own story, finally free. I sat in my empty house reading these posts, feeling sick. But Marcus had told me what to do. Don't respond. Don't engage. Just collect. So I took screenshots of everything. Every post, every comment, every carefully curated lie. I saved them all in the folder that was growing thicker every day. The folder that would eventually show a judge exactly who Lydia really was. One post particularly stood out. A photo of her holding a champagne glass with a caption, "Sometimes you have to take what's yours and start over." No apologies. The irony was almost funny. She'd literally taken what was mine, and she was posting about it publicly, too arrogant or too stupid to realize she was building evidence against herself. Marcus called that evening. Don't respond to any of it, he reminded me. Let her keep talking. Everything she posts is potential evidence. We filed a civil claim on a Tuesday morning. The paperwork was formal, legal, filled with language about conversion of property and unauthorized transfers. But underneath the legalese was a simple truth she'd stolen from me, and I wanted it back. The process server delivered the documents to Lydia's new apartment that afternoon. I wasn't there to see her reaction, but I imagined it. The confidence draining from her face as she realized this wasn't over. That I wasn't just accepting what she'd done. That there would be consequences. She called me 3 hours later. The first time I'd heard her voice since she'd driven away with my father's truck. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won out. "Hello, Lydia. What the hell is this?" Her voice was sharp, angry. "You're seriously suing me? After everything. After everything." I repeated, my own voice surprisingly calm. "You mean after you stole my inheritance and abandoned me right after my father's funeral?" "I didn't steal anything," she snapped. "That money was in our joint account." "It was ours. It was separate property," I said. "And you know it. That's why you transferred it at 3 in the morning instead of talking to me about it." She was quiet for a moment. Then her voice changed, became almost pleading. "Henry, don't do this. We can work this out without lawyers. You're just going to waste money fighting me. It's not a waste if I get back what's mine. You're really going to take everything from me," she said, her voice rising again. "Take everything from you?" I felt anger surge through me for the first time. "Lydia, it was mine to begin with." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, adrenaline flooding my system. But I felt something else too. Power. Agency. For the first time since this started, I'd stood up for myself. I'd refused to be manipulated or guilt-tripped into accepting what she'd done. The phone rang again immediately. I declined the call. She tried 3 more times. I ignored all of them. Marcus had been clear about this. No contact except through lawyers. Every conversation was a chance for her to manipulate, to record, to twist my words into something they weren't. So I let her calls go to voicemail, deleted them without listening, and focused on what I could control. Over the next week, Lydia started reaching out to mutual friends. I heard about it through the grapevine. She was spinning the story, painting herself as the victim of a vindictive ex-husband who was trying to ruin her life. Some people believed her. Some people chose sides without knowing the full story. I lost friends during this time. People who'd seemed close suddenly stopped returning my calls. Social events I would have been invited to went forward without me. It hurt, but it also clarified things. Real friends, the ones who mattered, reached out to hear my side. They asked questions instead of making assumptions. They offered support instead of judgment. And I learned to value those people more than the ones who'd abandoned me. On Sunday morning, I drove to the cemetery. My father's grave was still fresh, the grass not yet grown over the displaced earth. I sat beside it on the cold ground, my back against the headstone behind his. "Hey, Dad," I said quietly. "I'm sorry it took me so long to come back." The cemetery was empty except for me. Birds called from trees nearby. The morning sun was just starting to burn off the fog. "I messed up," I continued. "I trusted someone I shouldn't have. I let her take the money you worked so hard to save. I let her drive away in the truck you loved." My voice cracked. "But I'm fixing it. Marcus is helping me. We're going to make this right." I talked for a long time. About regret and loneliness and betrayal. About the process we were going through. The legal steps, the slow march toward justice. About how much I missed him and wished he was here to tell me what to do. "I'm going to get the truck back," I promised. "And I'm going to restore it properly the way you taught me. And when it's done, I'll drive it the way you used to, early mornings before work, just enjoying the engine." A text came through as I was leaving. "Marcus, preliminary hearing scheduled for next month. Judge wants to review the documentation." This is good. I looked back at my father's grave one more time. Then I drove home to prepare. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. I took the day off work and met Marcus at the courthouse an hour early. He walked me through what to expect. The formality, the procedures, the way judges like things presented. "Just be honest," he said. "Tell the truth calmly. Don't let her get under your skin. Lydia arrived 15 minutes before we were called in. She wore a professional dress, makeup carefully applied, hair perfect. She was trying to look responsible, trustworthy. Her new boyfriend started to follow her inside, but the bailiff stopped him. Only parties to the case and their attorneys allowed. I saw the frustration flash across both their faces. Inside the courtroom, we sat on opposite sides. I could feel her staring at me, but I kept my eyes forward. Marcus presented our case methodically. The inheritance documentation showing it was separate property. The bank records showing unauthorized transfers. The timeline that proved she'd planned this. Lydia's attorney, a tired-looking man who seemed overmatched, tried to argue that the funds were marital property because they'd been deposited into a joint account. The judge looked skeptical. He reviewed the documents for several minutes, then asked Lydia's attorney some pointed questions about authorization and consent. Finally, he made his ruling. I'm ordering a temporary freeze on all accounts pending full document review. Both parties are to provide complete financial disclosure within 30 days. It wasn't a final victory, but it was movement. Progress. A judge taking this seriously. We walked out of the courthouse, and I saw Lydia's face. The confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked like fear. Lydia started sending emails after the hearing. Long, rambling messages that swung between apologetic and accusatory. Sometimes she claimed she never meant to hurt me, that she just panicked and made mistakes. Other times she'd accuse me of being controlling, of ruining her chance at happiness. I didn't respond to any of them. Marcus had been clear. No contact. Let her talk. Let her reveal herself. Then one email came through that made Marcus actually laugh when I showed it to him. I worked for that money too, she'd written. I supported you for years. I deserve to use it how I want. There it was, in writing. Admission that she'd taken the money intentionally, that she considered it hers to use. Strategic devastation. She just gave us everything we need, Marcus said, printing out the email. This shows knowledge and intent. She knew it was your inheritance and she took it anyway, believing she was entitled to it. I sat in Marcus's office looking at that printed email, feeling something between satisfaction and sadness. This was the woman I'd loved. And she was so confident in her righteousness, so certain she'd done nothing wrong, that she was literally confessing in writing. Over the next weeks, more emails came. Each one digging her hole deeper. Each one documenting her mindset, her actions, her complete lack of remorse. I saved them all, organized them chronologically, watched the case against her grow stronger with every angry message. The friend group split almost exactly down the middle. Some people heard Lydia's side and believed her. They saw me as the vindictive ex, the man who couldn't let go, who was using lawyers to punish someone for leaving. Others asked questions, heard my side, looked at evidence. They saw a woman who'd systematically stolen from someone at their most vulnerable moment. A few friends tried to stay neutral, which mostly meant they stopped talking to both of us. I understood that too. Nobody wanted to be caught in the middle of someone else's war. But I learned who I could really count on. Toby from the plant invited me to dinner with some other coworkers. Nothing fancy, just burgers and beer at someone's house. They didn't pry into details. They just included me, made sure I wasn't alone, reminded me that I still had people who cared. It was Toby who first mentioned the public post Lydia had made. Henry, man, I don't know if you want to see this or not. He showed me his phone. Lydia had written a long post about how her ex-husband was ruining her life with frivolous lawsuits. How she was just trying to move on, but I wouldn't let her. The comments were mixed. Some people supporting her, others asking pointed questions about why someone would sue unless they had a real case. I handed the phone back. Thanks for showing me. You doing okay? Toby asked. Getting there, I said. And for the first time, I meant it. Marcus called me into his office with urgent news. We got the full financial audit back from the bank. He spread papers across his desk, his expression serious. Henry, this is worse than we thought. I sat down slowly. How much worse? She didn't just take the inheritance. She spent it. Fast and recklessly. He pointed to line items. Designer furniture for the apartment. Jewelry. Electronics. A trip to Miami last month. She burned through almost $30,000 in 2 months. I felt sick. My father had saved that money slowly, carefully, over decades. And she'd blown through it on things that didn't matter, things that would depreciate or disappear. There's more, Marcus said quietly. She also opened credit cards in your name. 3 of them. Maxed them out. I stared at him. What? Identity theft, Marcus said. She used your information to open accounts without your knowledge or permission. That's not just civil anymore, Henry. That's criminal. The room felt suddenly cold. What does that mean? It means we can't pursue criminal charges if we want. Identity theft, fraud. She could face jail time. He looked at me carefully. But we can also keep this civil. Use it as leverage to force restitution without involving the police. Your choice. I thought about Lydia's face at the hearing. The fear that had replaced her confidence. I thought about my father, about doing this the right way. Keep it civil, I said finally. But make it clear what will happen if she doesn't cooperate. Marcus drafted a settlement offer. Return all remaining funds. Sell the apartment and expensive items to repay what she'd spent. Close the credit cards and take responsibility for the debt. Admit wrongdoing in writing. And return my father's truck. In exchange, we wouldn't pursue criminal charges or report the identity theft to authorities. It was more than fair. It was compassionate, given what she'd done. Lydia's lawyer took 3 days to respond. The answer was no. She refused the settlement. She claimed she'd done nothing wrong and wouldn't admit to crimes she didn't commit. She wanted to go to trial to let a judge decide. Marcus called me with the news. She's making a mistake. The evidence against her is overwhelming. But if she wants to fight, we'll fight. How long will a trial take? I asked. Months. Maybe longer. It'll be expensive and exhausting. But Henry will win. I'm certain of it. I hung up feeling oddly calm. Lydia's arrogance was becoming her downfall. She was so convinced she'd done nothing wrong, so sure the system would somehow vindicate her, that she couldn't see reality. While I'd been building a meticulous case, she'd been spending money and posting on social media. While I'd been documenting everything, she'd been confessing in emails. She'd built the case against herself. I just had to be patient enough to let it play out. Over the next month, things started falling apart for Lydia. I heard about it through mutual acquaintances. Her boyfriend had left. Apparently, he'd been attracted to the money, the lifestyle, the woman who seemed confident and successful. When the money stopped flowing and legal problems mounted, he disappeared. Some of her new friends pulled away, too. The ones who'd flocked to her when she was posting about champagne and new beginnings. They didn't want to be associated with someone facing potential criminal charges. Her social media went quiet. No more posts about self-care and living your best life. No more photos of expensive meals and designer clothes. Just silence. Then one afternoon, she showed up at the plant. Security called me to the front gate. I walked out to find her standing by her boyfriend's car, the fancy one she'd driven away in. He wasn't with her. Her eyes were red, makeup smeared. She looked nothing like the confident woman I'd seen at the apartments. "Henry, please," she said when she saw me. "We need to talk." "We don't," I said quietly. "Anything you want to say, tell your lawyer." "I can't afford my lawyer anymore," she admitted. I had to let him go. I should have felt satisfaction. But mostly I just felt tired. "That's not my problem, Lydia. I didn't think you'd actually fight back," she said, her voice breaking. "I thought you'd just accept it and move on." "Why would you think that?" "Because you never fought for anything," she said. "Not for us, not for yourself. You just worked and came home and worked some more. I thought you didn't care enough to fight." I looked at her for a long moment. I cared too much. That was the problem. I cared about you more than you ever cared about me. I turned to walk away. "Henry, wait." But I didn't. I walked back through the gate, back to work, back to the life I was slowly rebuilding. Behind me, I heard her crying. But I didn't look back. 2 weeks later, we went back to court for the final hearing. This time, Lydia arrived without a lawyer. She'd filed paperwork to represent herself, which Marcus said was a terrible idea but ultimately her choice. She looked small sitting at the defendant's table alone, her confident armor completely gone. The judge reviewed all the evidence. The inheritance documents, the bank records, the emails where she'd admitted taking the money. the financial audit showing her reckless spending, the identity theft documentation. It took 3 hours. Lydia tried to speak several times to explain herself, but the judge kept redirecting her to address specific questions instead of making general statements. Finally, the judge delivered his ruling. The evidence is overwhelming. Ms. Calloway, you took funds that were legally separate property without authorization. You spent those funds recklessly. You committed identity theft. You have shown no remorse and no willingness to make restitution. He ordered her to return all remaining inheritance money immediately, to sell her apartment and belongings to repay what she'd spent, to close the fraudulent credit accounts and accept responsibility for that debt, to return the truck within 7 days. He also required a written admission of wrongdoing, and he warned that if she didn't comply fully, criminal charges would follow. Lydia sat there looking stunned, like she still couldn't believe this was happening. Like she genuinely thought her version of events would prevail over documented evidence. I watched her and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not anger, not even pity. Just emptiness where love used to be. The truck was returned on a Thursday evening. A tow truck brought it, which told me everything about its condition. I walked out to the driveway, and my heart sank. The paint was scratched and faded. One headlight was broken. The engine, the one my father had rebuilt piece by piece, sounded rough and misfired when the tow truck driver started it. Lydia had neglected it, maybe even abused it. This truck my father had loved, had poured hours into, had treated like family. I touched the steering wheel, running my hand over the cracked leather, and the grief hit me fresh and sharp. Not for my marriage, but for my father. For everything he'd built that had been carelessly destroyed. I sat in the driver's seat and cried. Really cried, for the first time since the funeral. For my father, for the truck, for the years I'd wasted on someone who didn't value what mattered. Toby and a couple other guys from work came over that evening. I mentioned the truck to them at lunch, and they volunteered to help assess the damage. It's rough, Toby admitted, looking under the hood. But it's not beyond saving. We can fix this, Henry. It'll take time and work, but we can bring it back. Another coworker pulled out his phone, showing me photos of his own restoration project. They started making lists of parts needed, talking about weekends in my garage, about bringing this truck back to life the way my father would want it. I stood there listening to them plan, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. And something else. Family. Not the family I'd married into and lost, but the family you choose, the people who show up when things are hard. 6 months later, my life looked completely different. The inheritance money had been returned, minus what Lydia had already spent. She'd sold her apartment at a loss, liquidated her expensive purchases, and slowly been making payments on what remained. I'd used the recovered money exactly as my father had intended. Paid off my mortgage, fixed up the house, set aside savings for emergencies, and put the rest toward restoring the truck. Every Saturday, Toby and the guys came over. We worked in my garage with the door open, classic rock playing on an old radio, slowly bringing my father's truck back to life. New paint, fixed engine, reupholstered seats, chrome polished until it gleamed. It was meditation and therapy and friendship all wrapped together. People from the plant who'd initially sided with Lydia or stayed neutral started reaching out. They'd seen what happened, how things had played out, and quietly revised their opinions. I didn't hold grudges. I accepted their apologies and invitations without making them feel worse. Life was too short for that. One evening, Toby and I hosted a small barbecue. Just a few guys from work, their families, simple food and good conversation. My house filled with laughter and noise, with people who genuinely cared. Someone brought their kid, who ran around a yard with joy. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was becoming a good one. A real one. A letter arrived that week. From Lydia. Handwritten, several pages long. I almost threw it away without reading it. But curiosity won out. The letter was different from anything Lydia had sent before. No accusations, no justifications, no manipulation. Just honesty, raw and painful. She apologized. Not with excuses or conditions, but simply and completely. She admitted what she'd done, acknowledged the hurt she'd caused, took full responsibility. She explained that therapy had helped her understand how wrong her actions were, How she'd convinced herself she deserved that money. How she justified taking it by rewriting our relationship in her mind as something that entitled her to everything. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't ask for anything. She just wanted me to know that she understood what she'd done and was working to become a better person. Not for me, but for herself. I read the letter twice, sitting in my newly restored living room, trying to decide how I felt. Part of me wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the betrayal as protection against ever being hurt like that again. But another part of me, the part that sounded like my father, knew that holding on to anger only hurt me. It didn't change the past. It didn't fix anything. I sat down and wrote a response. Brief, honest. Lydia, I appreciate your letter. I forgive you. Not because what you did was okay, but because I'm choosing to move forward without carrying this weight. I hope you find peace. I'm working on finding mine. I mailed it the next day, and with it, I let go of something heavy I'd been carrying for months. I was moving forward. Really forward this time. The morning was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like the world is holding its breath. A thin layer of fog sat low over the street, and the sky was still dark, only a soft gray hint of dawn showing at the edge. Henry stepped out onto the driveway with a small smile tugging at his lips. The air smelled like cold metal, pine trees, and the promise of a new day. The truck sat there again, his father's truck, though it looked tired. The paint had lost its shine. A few dents showed where someone had not cared to park it gently. The leather seat had a tear on the driver's side. But to Henry, it was beautiful. It was home. It was memory. He rested one hand on the hood and closed his eyes for a moment. He didn't think of Lydia when he touched the truck. He thought of his father's hands. Strong, patient, hands that fixed things, built things, and held his shoulder on hard days. This truck was more than metal and wheels. It was love. Inside the house, the letter he had written to Lydia sat folded on the counter. His words had been short. No coldness. No anger. Just truth. I forgive you. I'm moving forward. Not because she deserved forgiveness, but because he deserved peace. He opened the truck door and climbed inside. The seat groaned a little under his weight. The steering wheel felt familiar, even though it had been gone. He turned the key slowly. The engine coughed once. Then again. Then, gently, it came to life. The sound was rough but steady. Henry breathed out long and slow, feeling something inside him settle. The road was empty as he pulled out of the driveway. The morning sun began to rise, pushing soft gold light through the trees. The world felt new, as if the day understood everything he had survived. Henry did not feel triumphant. He did not feel like he had won. What he felt was lighter, like someone had finally taken a heavy coat off his shoulders. The hurt had happened. The loss was real, but he wasn't carrying it anymore. He drove past the old diner where he and Lydia used to eat. He did not look toward it. He drove past the park where they had walked on warm evenings. He did not slow down. Those memories did not sting anymore. They were just pieces of a story that was finished. At the top of the hill, Henry stopped the truck and watched the sunrise break open across the sky. Pink, orange, gold, a whole sky of new beginnings. He breathed in and let himself feel it fully. Not the pain, not the anger, just the quiet. He whispered, "I'm okay." And for the first time, it was true. Henry did not need revenge to heal. He did not need Lydia to suffer for him to rise. What he needed was exactly this, a morning with no regret, a road with no weight behind him, a life that was finally his again. And as the day unfolded before him, Henry drove forward, not away from the past, but toward the rest of his life.